Hey guys, this is Luna, and I had reached out to Reddit to see if anyone was interested in becoming an art therapist or to provide my 2 cents on what the path is like to become an expressive art therapist. And I got about 80 people interested. So I thought I would create this free 1 hour, a little less than 1 hour presentation and informational session on what that path is to become an expressive art therapist and a little bit of clarification on or like a comparison on if you choose the path as an art therapist or you choose the path as an expressive art therapist, what's the difference and what's the same. So I'll start with a presentation. If you see this and you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. And I have a bunch of free resources. And if you want support or coaching on it, I'm available for that as well, as I'm a creative career coach and an expressive art therapist and trauma specialist. So yeah, I'll give you that information in this presentation as well. All right, let's get started. Okay, so learning about expressive art therapy as a profession. I meant to do this live, so I was going to start you off with this drama therapy exercise called Sound and Motion. And if we do connect and I do a workshop, I look forward to sharing that with you. So who am I? My name is Luna, Angela Luna. And not only do I do art therapy, expressive art therapy, but I also like to do a lot of work in trauma healing using a parts work approach. And so I like to introduce my parts to you. This part of me is the dog lover. I love dogs so much that I can't walk the street without stopping at every single dog. And even when I was in my teens, I used to be like, look at him, he's so handsome. And my friends were looking for some guy, and it was always a dog. So I'm a dog lover. That's my dog Nala. I've been on a deep spiritual path and I've studied, I grew up in a big Mexican family. My mom was one of 11. So when my grandma was really connected to her spirituality. So I grew up with that. And then I ended up exploring a lot on my own, traveling around the world, studying different religions and learning meditation techniques, and then becoming certified to bring meditation to underrepresented communities about 25 years ago. And I've been doing that since. I'm a creator. I create courses and trainings, and I also created this holistic trauma healing card deck and journal. And that's me working on it there with my other dog, Simba. And this is my husband and I. Family and relationship is really important to me. And so I wanted to introduce my teammate in life, David. He also goes by Shock. And I am super connected to nature. I used to be known, even when I was as early as 2.5 years old, my mom couldn't find me and the neighbors would let her know that I was in a tree. So I've always been connected to nature. I now live right next, as you can see in the back behind me, right next to regional parks. And I do ascribe to the healing power of nature and sometimes also use that in my work. And finally, the professional me, and the reason why you're here is I am an expressive art therapist by training. I use that in my work. I also am a trauma specialist. I started my work working with children and families and school-based work and working with educators, doing the work, the clinical work, and also providing trainings and education. I then moved to working with a group who specialized in sex assault and sex abuse and reunification with families. And then I helped to start and run a trauma clinic in Alameda County in Oakland, and did that for 5 years as the manager, lead clinician, education didactic trainer, and supervisor. And now I'm in private practice. I work with individuals, mostly young adults and teens, using a holistic approach to trauma healing, predominantly in using these expressive art therapy tools and other trauma healing tools like brain spotting, EMDR, parts work, somatic, and an approach called heart math. So I use a very holistic approach so we can access the root to the trauma. Let's see. And I also love providing trainings. I've provided hundreds and hundreds of trainings, and I'll talk a little bit about that later as well. This is the card deck that I created, which is part of what you can do if you follow this path, is use all of these resources. This is about 20 years of my work and includes all of the healing tools that I use. On the other side of these images is the content, is the written part that guides you through the exercise. There's 4 parts to this deck. One is the education on holistic trauma healing. It gives all the education around things like trauma triggers, dissociation, generational trauma. And then there's 35 interventions, which include art and body interventions, nature therapy, movement. And then I go into interpersonal, how to work with healing shame, healing communication, finding healthy relationships. And then the last part is about growth, post-traumatic growth, celebrating your wins, your milestones, and looking towards the future. So if you're interested in that, I can share more about that. Today, we'll be scratching the surface of the surface. This is a very deep process, and there's a lot to learn. So I will be basically introducing you to the minor part of it, and there's a lot more to learn. So if you want to learn more, we can also do some coaching together. I think I just left my presentation. I often bring these to my trainings, which are a body cutout and a mandala. You feel free, if you have art materials with you right now, to write a circle on a page. And as you're listening to me, you can reach for the colors that you're feeling, the energy that you're feeling, and you can put those colors and that feeling into the circle, which is the container, or you can notice how your body's feeling as you're taking in the information. Reach for colors that represent what that part of your body is feeling, and you can put that in your body. So you could just draw a body shape and use this exercise. It's a good exercise that I use with clients, and I also use it in trainings. So I thought, even though this is really brief, this is a 45, maybe 50-minute presentation, you can do this exercise while you're listening. So let me give you a little overview around the key differences between expressive art therapy and art therapy. And we'll start with art therapy. So art therapy is not, I didn't get my degree in art therapy. I got it in expressive art therapy, and those are two different paths. The art therapy path generally requires you to have prerequisites of a studio work, a certain amount of hours in studio work, and usually 12 to 18 units. You also need some prerequisites pertaining to psychology. Often it's a developmental psych and a normal psych. Each program is different, so you can acquire based on the university and the degree you're looking at, the master's degree. To become an art therapist, you'll need your master's degree in art therapy, and that program will have to meet the National Art Therapy Standards. And usually the accredited institution that's offering you a master's in art therapy should have this. Most degrees in therapy take 3 years, some are 2, but generally they're 3 years. After you finish your master's, or during it, you'll be also working on your clinical training hours during grad school as a practicum student, and usually do about 700 of those. And in California, you need 3,000 hours of supervised postgraduate hours to get licensed. So there's a lot of hours that go into these professions of art therapy and expressive art therapy, and to become a therapist in general. So it is a commitment. It can take several years before you're licensed, and then you can sit for the exam and then be a licensed clinician and start to do more independent work. So, if it's something you're thinking about, you want to know what you're getting into in terms of the requirements. Expressive art therapy is a little bit more flexible, especially in terms of prerequisites. And the prerequisites don't require art therapy training. And so you don't need any art prerequisites, any previous training in art. And also often they don't require any prerequisites in psychology. So for me, for example, I have a law degree, and I had a bachelor's in Spanish literature. I got a law degree, and then I did my master's as an expressive art therapist, my MA in EXA. And that was fine. I didn't need any art studio credits, and I didn't need any psychology prerequisites. So I went in with my law degree. You also need to become an expressive art therapist. You'll need your master's in expressive arts therapy, which is a clinical track. I did mine at CIIS in San Francisco, the California Institute of Integral Studies. It typically takes 3 years, and I did 3 years in my studies. Some folks do a different track where you could get your master's in counseling and then do an expressive art therapy specialization. It's going to take a little longer because you can get the expressive arts therapy certification that can take up to a year or a year and a half. Then to be practicing in the world, you'll have the same internship prerequisites, around 700 hours while you're in school doing your practicum, and then 3,000 hours supervised postgraduate hours for licensure, and then you can sit for the exam and become a licensed expressive art therapist. So I want to tell you a little bit more about expressive arts therapy, since that's what this presentation is about and what I have my degree in and what I work with. First off, what is expressive arts therapy? It's a form of therapy that uses creative expression. So it doesn't only include art, it also includes music, movement, and writing. And the aim is to provide healing and growth. Like I said, there's 5 areas in expressive arts therapy, which include the visual arts. So art therapy is predominantly focused on the visual arts. Expressive arts therapy includes the visual arts and all these different ways you can use the visual arts for healing. It also includes movement. So dance therapy is a part of it. And dance therapy is its own degree you could get as well. Music therapy is included in expressive arts therapy. So we learn how to use music and sound and rhythm and playlists, as well as your voice. So singing and how singing can help with processing and trauma processing, and how you can use your voice in different ways. So that's included in an expressive arts therapy degree. Again, music therapy also is its own profession. And drama therapy. So we also learn drama therapy when we're trained in expressive arts therapy. As I mentioned before, I had opened up with that potential sound and motion, which is a drama therapy intervention, which I use in groups. And there's a lot of these wonderful interventions you can do in drama therapy. And finally, excuse me, I'll go back one, narrative therapy or poetry. And I love to use that too. And what's great about these different approaches is each person has their own way of creatively expressing themselves. So when you have access to these tools, these 5 different ways of approaching healing, creative healing, you can really create a unique map with the person who you're working with, because not everyone's the same. And even within each one of those, even within the visual or the music, everyone has their preferred way of connecting with that creative expression and how that can be used for healing. I want to share a little bit about the principles so you really get a better sense of what expressive arts therapy is. And one of the things we like to focus on is to eradicate 2 main limiting beliefs. And one is, I'm not good at art. I think often we're conditioned to believe this in society. When we're children, we don't have this belief, but later in life, this seems to come and dominate. And so that's one of the ones we work at. When I'm working with someone, we try to just address that right away, that this isn't about being good at art. This is about the process, nor is it about being a good artist or thinking you're an artist. That's the other limiting belief. I'm not an artist. And we work with removing those barriers so we can get access to the good juju and the healing. One of the main tenets of expressive arts therapy, and I imagine art therapy as well, even though that's not what I got my degree in, is the process over product. And what that means is you're focusing on the experience of creating and not the final piece. And that takes away a lot of that self-judgment. It opens up, we'll talk a little bit more about how that can benefit the healing process. We value the journey of expression and not how quote unquote good it looks. So what we do is we emphasize what we're noticing, not what other people are going to think of this, but what we're noticing in the process and in what we've created. And we have a belief that all creative expression is valid. So what we don't do is we don't critique or analyze art. Rather, we connect to how it feels. So it's like, how does this feel? Rather, what does it mean? Right. So we get out of our head and into that more unconscious, that more body experience, that more right brain, get away from that thinking logical brain, because a lot of where stuff stored is not there. It's in the creative right brain or in that limbic part of your brain. And what this allows is that then there's no performance pressure, right? We remove any of the judgment. We can start to create without fear, with more authenticity. And it really helps people who don't feel artistic. It's not about feeling artistic, it's about creating. And we're all born creative and we have creative impulses in us. And so it's a matter of accessing those. And the focus is on the inner experience and the discovery and not so much the result. So what we do is the approach that we use when we're working with, let's say, a practice that we've introduced to somebody. They've maybe, and one common practice can be if I feel this feeling of like nervousness or guilt or shame, we can draw that, how it feels in our body and the color and the shape, and put that on the page so we can start to see it. So it's not in us, we're not blended with it, but we can start to see it so we can understand it and have curiosity about it and get to know it and even talk to it. Rather than taking an analytical approach about what this means, we ask things like, I wonder what this is about. What might be happening here? We can relate to it as a clinician. I'm moved by this. Tell me more about this. And we can even connect to them in terms of our relationship and be like, oh, that reminds me of this. I'm curious about that. So it's more of an open-ended curiosity versus analysis. And where can you apply expressive arts therapy and art therapy? Really, you can apply it anywhere. It works for everybody. It's not, I think there can be these false beliefs around art therapies for kids or expressive arts therapy for kids, and it's absolutely not just for kids. I work with adults and groups of all sorts and organizations, and I employ this everywhere across the board. So you can work with all ages, all cultures, all diagnosis. Because it's not verbal, it actually allows a lot more flexibility because sometimes there's barriers to therapy if it's focused on just verbal. People process differently. And I've even worked with children who are what's called selectively mute, where they're not verbal at all. And so it'd be really limiting to focus on talk therapy. And you can work with groups. I work with a ton of groups across diagnosis, addiction, PTSD, depression, anxiety, attachment disorders, and more. I don't know why I have a W there. And this is where I've used my work in expressive arts therapy. I worked with children and teens and adults and families. I worked with agencies, and these are just a few. I worked with Bay Area Women Against Rape, Bay Area Community Resources, a number of organizations, educational institutions. I've worked with attorneys, and I've done this work with the DA's office of Alameda County. I've worked with clergy. I had a group of 30 clergy that wanted to bring trauma healing to the congregation. So I brought a creative trauma healing and working with domestic violence. I did a presentation on creative trauma healing and identifying domestic violence, and they brought that back to their congregation. We've done this work in hospitals. I was part of a group who brought an expressive arts therapy program to Contra Costa hospitals, and they're still doing that work. I worked with law enforcement, the domestic violence unit of Alameda County, Oakland, and they had a lot of fun. So I think we often have these biases as to who will respond to this or not. And my experience is that everyone, or like a lot of people, respond to this. I've held mindfulness groups with all these organizations in conjunction with art. I worked with therapists and trainees, and I've offered this in Spanish and English because I'm bilingual. It really gives you really can work with a number of organizations and have a lot of opportunities of how you can bring this work into the world. These are some photos of a few of the things we did at the hospital. One of the things we did was create a farmer's market type stand out in the front of the hospital, and people were waiting for their family who were in oncology and getting treatment or having other crises at the hospital. And this was a place for folks to connect, to calm their nervous system, to connect to each other, and to have some relief. So these are some of the exercises, some of the folks that participated in that. We also did events. One is we worked with, in this case, I was working with labor and delivery. We had someone that came in and brought the cast. So they did belly casts with their partners joined them. In his case, he's putting hands on her belly cast. And it allowed a lot of connection and feeling of calm. We also did community events where people could create different art pieces. And this was this wonderful interactive metal work that they did, and they could express what they wanted to bring into the world. And this was based on what they needed in the world. So we created shakers, and if they needed compassion or courage or calm or joy, they would pick those beans and put them in the shakers. So these are just a few little things in this one particular environment that I'm sharing with you. And honestly, it's so broad. There's so much you can do because creativity is endless. So going back to art therapy and expressive art therapy and the key differences, just to revisit that. Again, art therapy, you'll need a strong visual background. That's part of the prerequisites, and it's a bit more structured and focused on the visual arts. In expressive arts therapy, you don't need a specific background, and you can explore, as I mentioned, these 5 different creative modalities. So it's you decide. Are you someone who wants to build more, or is like more connected to the visual arts, and that's who you are, and you want to work specifically with visual media, and you like that regulated, that more structured path, that could be a good path for you. But if you come from a different background, you don't have an arts background, and you're interested in this, and you'd like to tap into the different creative modalities and this flexibility, and possibly even maybe you have your therapy degree already and you'd like to do a certificate, this might be a good approach for you. The truth is, both paths can lead to the same career in the end, just a different way of working with this career. And the main difference is that prerequisites and the training philosophy. Your ultimate scope of practice and your job opportunities are going to be very similar with both of them. In this presentation, you can take note of some organizations, the American Art Therapy Association and Art Therapy Credential Board and Accreditation Council for Art Therapy Education. Those are, if you're wanting to look further into the field, I'd visit those websites. And you'll be getting this recording, so you can pause this and look at those. And for the expressive arts therapy, you can look into the field more, and you can research through the International Expressive Arts Therapy Association, American Art Therapy Association, American Music Therapy Association, drama therapy, and dance therapy. Since all 4 of those have their own, you can look at each one of those so you can get a sense of them and then decide which path is for you. I wanted to offer you, if you have this recording and you join me, a free sample deck you can scan that QR code and you can get a free sample of this deck. It includes art therapy interventions, trauma healing interventions, nature ones, like I was saying, movement, mindfulness, journaling. So there's a lot in there. And this is a beautiful offering. You'll get like 10 cards and journal prompts. And this is how you can connect with me. You can reach out to me on my website, angelalunatherapy.com. Feel free to email or call luna@angelalunatherapy.com. And this is my Google Voice. Feel free to leave me a message at 510-992-3492. And also feel free to check out my YouTube if you want to get to know my work more. I have a channel, and you can click there to get access. Find me there, Angela Luna Therapy. And I see that there's one person present. I'm going to end this presentation for the recording. And if anyone has any questions or wants to get to know me or would like some one-on-one coaching, I'd be happy to do a 15 or 20-minute call with you so we could talk more. And you can do that by reaching out to my website at angelalunatherapy.com and connecting to me via my contact page. And I'd be happy to support you on this path. It's one that I love. It makes the profession fun for me, and it's deep and it's meaningful. And I'm here to support you if it's something that you're feeling excited about possibly pursuing. All right. So I'm going to end the recording, and then I'll take Q&A. Take care and be well.